Caledonian McBrain and the Big Light present...
They say you can't truly understand a landscape until you've tasted it. If you stand on the shores of Islay or under the jagged peaks of Harris, the air tells you a story. It's thick with the scent of damp earth, burning peat, and the sharp, crystalline spray of the Atlantic. For centuries, the people of Scotland's Western Isles have been combining those exact ingredients: the water, the barley, and the peat dug from their land. Whisky connects the deep history of the Scottish Islands to people sitting in bars all around the world, enjoying a dram of Uisce Bea, the water of life. For some, though, whisky can seem a bit daunting, can't it? People worry about drinking it the wrong way and the etiquette associated with it. With water, with ice, without ice, mixers. What kind of glass do you use? We've all heard these questions, and maybe we've even asked them as well. Well, we need a guide who knows the history, respects the craft, but never forgets that at the end of the day, whisky is meant to be shared and it's meant to be enjoyed. We're thrilled to welcome a guest who has navigated the journey from the forests of Sweden to the heart of the Scottish whisky scene. Moa Reynolds, better known to her global audience as the Swedish Whisky Girl, is an award-winning writer, spirits judge, and the Icons of the Whisky Communicator of the Year. What started as a digital diary to track her favourite drams has blossomed into a career as one of the most refreshing voices in the industry. As a weekly columnist for the Herald and co-author of Scotch, the Balmoral Guide to Scottish Whisky, Moa is renowned for breaking down the stuffy stereotypes of whisky and making it accessible to everyone. So whether you're a lifelong fan of whisky or someone exploring it for the first time, she's here to convince you that your next great adventure involves a ferry ticket and a Glencairn glass. Moa, it's great to have you with us. Welcome.
Such kind words. Thank you so much for having me. This feels like a great start.
Well, it certainly is. Well, let's start with a bit of a challenge then. If you're standing on the deck of a ferry, Moa, heading out west, and you've got one dram in your hand to toast the islands as they loom into view, tell me, Moa, what's in that glass?
Oh, if I can only pick one, that is such a tricky question. But it has to be the whiskey that got me into whiskey. So when I started out, I didn't really enjoy whiskey. It was all a little bit too strong and it all kind of tasted the same. But eventually I found one that, to me, just tasted like hiking through the forests of Sweden and now will forever remind me of the Scottish Isles. And that is Ardbeg 10. Quite a punchy, smoky flavour. But it was my gateway whiskey, the whiskey that made me fall in love with Scotch. And it just has such a special place in my heart.
How did a Swedish girl become such a whisky expert?
That is also a great question. I always like to say that I kind of banana peeled into whiskey. And I moved to Edinburgh over 10 years ago to study professional dance. Might not seem like your average route into whiskey. But I then met my now husband on a date when he was just about to start working in the whiskey industry. And I had previously studied wine. So he asked me if I could teach him how to taste whiskey, and in return he would bring whiskey samples home. And I thought he was quite cute, so I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. And eventually we tried our way through whiskey. I found one that I liked, the one I mentioned, Ardbeg 10-year-old, and thought, I want to document this journey. There's so many out there and I want to see the differences. I want to delve deeper into the history and the culture behind it. So I started taking a little photo of all the whiskey I tried. I wrote a little bit about it so I could remember what I thought. And then suddenly other people wanted to follow that journey as well. And I started getting opportunities to start working in whiskey, writing about it, doing tasting notes, just kind of recommending whiskies to others. And now I'm here. It's a weird journey.
The rest is history, absolutely. Well, let's talk about the romantic image that a lot of people have about Scotch whisky, you know, sitting by a peat fire while a gale blows a hoolie outside. Moa, is that the reality of, say, having a whiskey when you're in the islands, perhaps? Or is it even, better than the picture postcard version?
I am a romantic at heart, so I am very inclined to agree that no matter what the weather holds, where you are, if you're on a Scottish island where the rain is coming from all directions and you just have to laugh at how kind of dreich the whole situation is, whiskey just makes it better. It captures that moment of where you're at in flavour, in a memory. And then when you go back to that whiskey, you'll remember how soaked you were on that rainy day, or how the sun was shining when you were sitting next to someone you like, a family member or a friend. And just visiting the Scottish Islands, even if you don't drink whiskey, it's just such a magical thing. It's something about the isolation, the rugged, wild nature around you. I grew up in the countryside in Sweden. I'll always have a soft spot for incredibly wild nature. And I do have a soft spot for seals as well. So if there's an opportunity you can see some wildlife, I'll be there as well.
I love seals too. They're great. They're so inquisitive. Let's talk about island whiskies then, because you've done island hopping tastings before. To you, is there a distinct personality to island whiskies that sets them apart from, say, a Speyside or a lowland dram? Surely it's not just about the smoke and the peat.
Yeah, I would say so. I think the regionality for whiskies was once a really helpful tool for showing people what you could expect in flavour from different areas. But nowadays, I feel like those lines are a bit more blurred. But with island whiskey, what I very often tend to find is a saline quality, something salty that reminds you of a sea breeze or standing on the coast. And it's almost a little bit of whiskey magic, because no one can really understand or explain. Is it coming from distillation? Is it maturation? What is it? But even whiskies distilled on Scottish Isles that have maybe matured in a warehouse on the mainland still have this quality. So it is something about being so reminiscent and the flavour belonging to where it's from that I always tend to find in island whiskies. And it's something that's quite unique for them. They actually tend to have a bit of regionality to them.
Well, talking of regionality, let's mention Islay whiskey. It's sometimes known as the jewel in the crown of island whiskey production. And it is a whiskey region, of course, in its own right. In fact, its famous whiskey festival, Fèis Islay, is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. So what is it about Islay that makes it so special?
I feel like I could talk about Islay for such a long time. It's my favourite place in the world. And I think it started with me hearing so much about it. When I started getting into whiskey, I worked at the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh. And every day we would do the tour multiple times, and we would see this beautiful landscape, dramatic beaches and sunsets on the west coast, especially on Islay, talking about the whiskey that is as wild as it's smoky. And the romanticism of it was difficult to not take in. And when I eventually got to go and see Islay, it just surpassed my expectations. It was so magical. It's something about it. It's quite a trek getting there, so you'll know yourself. Even the ferry journey on its own is over 2 hours. And that's after you've done a long drive. And it's something about how isolated it is. I still can't really wrap my head around that they started distillation at so many distilleries when all you had was boats. You had to get the barley in on the boats. You had to get the whiskey off the island on the boats. Even today, it proves a challenge with the roads and kind of the infrastructure of it all. But also just coming to this island where you know that every drop of, for example, that Ardbeg you've tried has been distilled on the island. It has a romanticism that I just really love so much. And even I brought my mum over and she doesn't like whiskey at all. And she just fell in love with the island without the whiskey. So there is something special about just being there.
Well, from Islay in the southwest of the Inner Hebrides, let's take a trip north, because we're seeing a massive boom in new distilleries. I'm thinking of places like Harris, Raasay and Torrevik on Skye. From a visitor's perspective, how does the experience at these younger modern distilleries compare to walking into, the 200-year-old giant like Lafroig, perhaps?
I think they've done a really good job. They, of course, have the challenge. There is something so charming about going to old distilleries that might have 200 years behind them and seeing these distilleries that were built for the sole reason of producing whiskey. But there's also something so lovely as a visitor being able to visit somewhere that could have been built with visitors in mind. They can make sure you have a really nice experience once you're there, that there's accommodation options nearby, perhaps, or a really lovely bar with a nice view. And when you do the tour, it will also make sense because the production is lined up in a way that you go from one step to another in the same way that the spirit moves. But there is, of course, also that charm of old distilleries. So it kind of depends on what experience you're looking for.
Yeah, I've been to these new distilleries and it really is a great visitor experience. Do you think, Mo, that these new locations are maybe changing whisky culture?
I do think so in a way. And I think one of the clearest ways you can see this is that people are now open to trying younger spirits. Of course, whiskey has to be at least 3 years in a cask to be called whiskey. But people are trying 3-year-old whiskey or 4-year-old or 5-year-old, 6-year-old. It doesn't have to be 10-year-old or 12-year-old anymore. And I think it's because, or perhaps partially to the fact that these new distilleries, they can be designed and optimize every single little piece of the puzzle. Whereas an old distillery, they did it the way they did it because that's what worked for them then. But that might have been 200 years ago. And even though they should perhaps optimize or would want to optimize, they can't do that because that could change their unique character. And that's what they've built their brand and their flavour upon. But these new distilleries, they can optimize everything from mashing to fermentation to distillation and maturation. So their flavour is really optimized as soon as the spirit goes in the casks. So perhaps it's ready a little bit earlier to be tried and enjoyed, or perhaps we're just so aware of whiskey and these new distilleries have led the way that we're a bit more experimental and we dare to try something that isn't what everyone expects whiskey to be, this really, really old, rounded spirit. It can be a little bit youthful, but still have a really nice flavour.
Now, we all know about the Kalmac island hopping, which can really help people plan an itinerary for the islands and know what connections they're going to get to and where they can go and what islands they can visit. There's something similar that's come about too. It's called the Hebridean Whisky Trail, which will help people taste all the whiskies. What do you know about that?
I think these trails are really, really good and it helps visitors out just to share the knowledge that these distilleries are there. Because it might not be top of mind for you if you go to a really remote island that there's a distillery there. Because imagine how difficult it is for you to get there and then imagine that you set up a distillery there. And I think these whiskey trails, like the Hebridean Whisky Trail, is a great way to spread knowledge that these distilleries exist and they're happy to welcome visitors. And it makes it easier for visitors as well. Like they've already done a part of the planning for you, so it'd be a shame not to use it. Definitely recommend everyone to check it out.
Indeed. So if I gave you a week off then, Moa, and a ferry pass, if I threw that in as well, what is the Moa Reynolds experience? Where do we start and where do we end?
Am I going to be terribly boring and say I would go to Islay? I feel I cannot not say Islay. I just love going back. I have not yet been this year and would love to make it an annual thing. So I would definitely go back to Islay. But I also like seeing new things. And I still haven't been to the Isle of Arran. So that is high on my list. And perhaps in the area we could throw in Isle of Bute as well. If I have a week, I quite like slow travel, but I think I could manage those 3 locations in 1 week.
I love it. So we're starting in Islay and we're ending in Bute.
Yeah, I think that's a good journey.
You know, we often talk about the very changeable Scottish weather on this podcast. So give us your pro tips then, Moa. What is the perfect dram for a sunny day on the deck of a Kalmac ferry? And then conversely, what is the perfect dram for when you're stuck inside watching that rain lash against the windows?
Doesn't that sound amazing? Is it weird that I also think that the latter scenario appeals to me more? In Sweden, we have a saying that there's no bad weather, there's only bad clothing. And believe me, whiskey tastes good in any weather. I've tried it in meters of snow, in rain coming from all directions, or in tropical sun. So I can highly recommend it wherever you are. But I think for a sunny day out on the deck of a Kalmac ferry, Perhaps try a Bunnahabhain 12-year-old. It's a really good go-to whiskey. It isn't smoky, even though it's from Islay. So that can be a preconception that all whiskey from the islands is smoky, but this one is not. It has a really nice caramel, toffee flavour, quite a lot of vanilla. Very smooth, very approachable. In my opinion, it's one of the best core range 12-year-olds out there. So that would be my sunny day dram. And if you go to rugged, rainy days inside, I think you want to try something that pairs beautifully with that experience. And I would go for a Talisker Portree. So Talisker Distillery is located on the Isle of Skye, and it tends to have quite a salty character. It tends to have notes of black pepper, so it can be a bit robust. But I think it really suits that island experience, especially when it's rainy. And the port cask used for maturation makes it a little bit rounder around the edges, a little bit fruitier. So I think it can be appealing to all people. It also goes really well with haggis. And you need good food if you're going to stay inside.
You paint a fantastic picture for us. I love both those whiskies, I have to say. Now, for people who are listening, Moa, and they're thinking, I would love to go, but I just don't know enough about whiskey. What would you say to them, to do a tour of a distillery? Do you need to be an expert, really, to enjoy and get every nuance out of these distilleries?
The short answer is absolutely not. I find, and I've had the opportunity to visit quite a few distilleries now, that the people working there are really friendly, really open, and they're happy to share their knowledge. You don't have to know anything. But if you want to learn more, take the opportunity to speak to these people, because they're the ones who are living there and experiencing both the whiskey and the island every day. They want to share their knowledge. I think it is also a misconception that you have to know about whiskey before you get into it, or that if you ask someone about it, they will look at you and be like, why don't you know more? But I think that's really dated. There's a lot of lovely, lovely people in whiskey, and it's the main reason that I'm still in whiskey and then that I like to work in whiskey, that there's so many lovely people that have stories to share and recommendations to give. So you don't have to know anything, but I highly recommend sparking up a conversation with someone about it, because that is one of the best parts of it, the social aspect of whiskey.
And just thinking about that social aspect, let's talk about, Highland or Hebridean hospitality. I'm thinking about accommodation. I'm sure, Moa, you'll have your favourites. But what hotels and hostelries would you recommend visiting for people who might be new to whiskey, like Ardbeg House or Ballygrant Inn?
So there's quite a few lovely places. I like to stay somewhere where there's a bit of an experience for the accommodation itself. If it is raining, I would like to be able to stay inside and still have a good time. So on Islay, Ardbeg House is incredibly fun. I would say it's a themed hotel, and the theme is Ardbeg. There's boats hanging in the ceiling, there's octopuses on the walls and crab cages in your hotel room. It is absolutely bonkers in the best way. And there is minis of whiskey hidden in your room, because all the rooms are different. So on a rainy day, maybe you'll go exploring, see if you can find a little whiskey in your room. But it is good fun. And even if you're just stopping by for food, it's also a really lovely place, or just a cocktail. I would also say that the Macri on Islay is also a really good experience, and I'm particularly fond of it because they have recently added a sauna and a cold plunge pool to just outside, and I'm a big fan of going in cold water, so that gets a gold star from me.
I love the sound of hidden whiskies in the room. It's like, let's go on a whiskey hunt.
Exactly.
OK, well, if a listener books their Calmac ticket tomorrow, they get to one of the islands of their choice and they walk into a bar and they order a dram, what is the one thing they should do to make sure they get the absolute most out of that moment? How do they savour it?
So I would say the short answer is be present and romanticise your life. But I would say what really enhances enjoying a dram for me, no matter which whiskey it is, if it's a Finnish rye whiskey, if it's a Scottish Island whiskey, whatever it may be, it's to think about what you're drinking. Because even if it's a 3-year-old, which is the minimum legal requirement for maturation for whiskey, what did you do 3 years ago? Because someone stood in a still room, a whole team of stillmen, and they crafted the spirits. And I think there's something so nice to think about the time that has passed, how long this whiskey has been waiting in a warehouse is completely silent, cold and dark for 3 years until it's ready for someone to enjoy it. And I think it's just a nice life lesson just to stop and think about it and just be present. And that's one of the highlights of whiskey for me.
And finally then, Moa, where is your next Scottish Island adventure?
I think I really want to go somewhere new. I think the Isle of Arran is high on my list, but also places like Mull, Barra and Bute. So I think it will probably be one of those.
Well, I have to say, it's been an absolute highlight to chat to you, Moa, and hear such detailed knowledge of whiskey and the geography attached to it all. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun for me.
And I think we should have a dram now. Slanjava.
Slanjava.
That's all for this episode of Scottish Island Adventures. Please subscribe, like, rate and review and share with your friends. Book your Caledonian McBrain Island adventure now. For show notes and more information on this and all my other island destinations, plus full details on Caledonian McBrain's routes, timetables, prices and bookings, go to calmac.co.uk. You've been listening to Scottish Island Adventures. It was presented by me, Tony Kearney, and I was joined on this episode by Moa Reynolds. It was written and produced by Michael Wilson Park, with engineering and mastering by Brian McAlpine for The Big Light. The executive producer was Fiona White.
From the Big Light Studio.